If you shoot with Canon and you're having trouble nailing your exposure in log, this video might be for you. Hey everyone, my name is Aaron and I'm hopefully going to give you a couple of quick tips to help you expose for C-Log or Clog3. So I shoot on the Canon R5 and I shoot almost all of my videos in Clog3 unless there's a specific reason that I need to not do that. I've had a lot of time and practice on exposing properly for Clog3 and for using it in post-production. Here's a couple of tips to hopefully help you nail your exposure in camera so that when you bring it in post-production, you can nail that color grade. Now I'm going to talk about Clog3 here, but a lot of these tips will work for Clog1 as well. Just keep in mind that your base ISO for Clog1 is 400 and your base ISO for Clog3 is going to be 800. So that brings me to my first tip, which is never to go below ISO 800 in Clog3 or ISO 400 when you're in Clog1. The reason you want to do this is you'll notice that if you try to go below ISO 800, you'll start to notice a little black bar come into your histogram. Now, a little tip for R5, there's a secret kind of not advertised dual native ISO in the camera. I don't know if it's actually a dual native ISO, but they do change how the algorithm in Clog3 manages noise, and that happens at ISO 3200. There are a lot of great videos out there on YouTube that show this, but once you go from ISO 2500 to 3200, you definitely see the image clean up a little bit. So if you're right on the edge of ISO 3200, go ahead and go up to 3200 and then just use an ND or your aperture to compensate for your exposure. My tip number 2 for Clog3 on cameras like this, the R5 and a lot of the other cinema cameras in Canon's lineup, is use your zebras. If you have false color, it's even better, but utilize those zebras. The settings I put my R5 in for zebras is I leave on zebra 1 and 2, and what you'll notice is that the little lines on zebra 1 go up and to the left of the frame you are looking at from behind the camera, and zebra 2 will go up and to the right when you're looking at your screen. For zebra 1, I set it to 70% plus or minus 5, and that will give you right where your skin tone should be sitting on the IRE scale. So what I'll do is I'll expose the skin tone to 70 IRE and then use lighting, composition, or some other tricks you might have to match your ambient to fit your skin tone. And then what I'll do is zebra 2, I will set at 95% so you can just start to see when those highlights clip. The reason that's important is if there's some detail in your highlighted areas, you may want to retain that data, so you don't want to clip it out. It'll blow out those highlights and you won't be able to pull data back in post. This is another time when lighting, composition, using a scrim, something like that to help balance your exposure is really going to come in handy. Now there is an obvious exception to the rule of letting highlights clip, and that's usually a direct light source. If I were to have this light over here in the frame, it would definitely be blown out, and that's okay. It's a light source. Usually it's okay to let those blow out because it's kind of expected and it looks natural to the eyes. But note that if you're trying to keep some of the color of that light source, sort of like the warm light behind me, you want to make sure that that does not clip, because it'll just look white in your image and you'll lose a lot of that saturation, or if you have a certain color, if it's a warmer tone, you will lose that color. And then finally, just remember that NDs are your friend. Don't always worry about shooting wide open everything and watch that base ISO. If you're clipping and you don't want to close down your aperture all the way, an ND filter is going to help you out. There are regular ND filters that just have set stops, and then there's also variable ND filters like the one I use here. Those filters are going to help you dial in your exposure to really get the look you're going for. Here's a little bonus tip for you. If you are using an R5 and you're watching your in-camera meter when you're exposing for Clog3, you're gonna notice that it's really far to the right, usually 1 to 2, sometimes even more stops over. The reason you're gonna see the meter lean so far to the right in the +1 or 2 exposure range is detail in log footage is all in the highlights. You don't see a lot of detail in the shadows of log footage. There will be some there, and it really depends on the camera too. The R5 is about medium as far as dynamic range goes, so you will see some shadow detail, but the real detail is in those highlights. You would much rather bring your exposure down in post, as long as you didn't blow something out, than to have to raise it up. When you raise it up, you're going to introduce a whole lot of noise. When you bring it down, you're actually gonna see usually a reduction in noise as long as you're at your base ISO and you're not pushing anything too far in the sensor. When I do bring my Clog3 footage in post, I always add the Canon utility LUT to bring it back to a Rec 709 color space. I'll include that down in the link below if you want to use it, but also you can go to Canon's website and download those for free. There's a whole slew. They basically just give you every utility LUT that they offer for all of their cameras and all of their log profiles. So it can be kind of daunting going through all of those LUTs and finding that particular one for your camera and for the log gamma that you're shooting in. So for Clog3 on the R5 specifically, in Cinema Gamut, I'm gonna go ahead and drop that in the description for you below. So those are my quick tips to help you expose in Clog3 and Clog. My best tip of all is just to play around with it, practice, shoot a lot of different challenging lighting scenarios, do some scenarios where you control the lighting yourself, take it into post, play with the exposure, and really just see how it looks for you. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this, hit the like button. It actually really does make a difference. Share it with somebody that you know also shoots in Clog. Also subscribe, leave me a comment down below, share some of your tips on how to expose for Clog or Clog3, or even if you use any other log format, share some of your tips down below on what you use and what you utilize to really nail that exposure in camera. I'll be seeing a lot more of you soon, so catch you on the next one.